I decided to write this book. I was an ASA Vietnam War resistor because there is a vast and hidden history of the Vietnam War, an untold story of secrets, shadows, and moral conflict known only to those who served behind the scenes. The years 1966 through 1968 were among the most turbulent in American memory, a time when the world seemed to be teetering on the edge of chaos, and the truth was often a casualty of war. Most Americans, both then and now, remain unaware of what truly unfolded during those years, of the clandestine operations, the wartime wrenching choices being made, and the heavy silence that fell over those who served in intelligence. I didn't read about these things in newspapers or see them dramatized on television. I lived them. I served in the United States Army Security Agency, a secretive branch of military intelligence that operated in the shadows, tasked with intercepting and decoding enemy communications across the globe. Our motto was Semper Vigilans, Latin for ever vigilant, and our mascot was an American eagle, cartoonishly rendered but deadly serious, sporting headphones and hunched over a radio set, eternally listening for secrets. During those years, I came to possess knowledge that few outside our circles would ever hear. I was entrusted with top-secret information, operational details, battle plans, and the coded whispers of war. And yet, as the conflict escalated and the body count climbed, I found myself grappling with a sense of disillusionment and outrage. In early February of 1968, with the war raging and casualties mounting, more than 500,000 U.S. soldiers stationed in Vietnam, over 20,000 already killed, and more than 80,000 wounded, I made a choice that would change my life forever. In early February in the year 1968, in San Francisco, California, while in the glare of television camera lights, I became, so I've been told, the first Army Security Agency soldier, still in uniform and on active duty, to publicly protest the Vietnam War. The local anti-war groups had invited the public to attend this event. About 100 people showed up, their faces a mixture of curiosity, anger, and hope. 6 major television networks carried my interview on the evening news, broadcasting my words into living rooms across the nation. I stood before the cameras, not as a faceless protester, but as Specialist Frederick H. Chard, Army Security Agency. The headline flashed in bold letters beneath me. When the reporters peppered me with questions, probing for secret information, for classified details, I stared back in silence. I refused to betray my oath. I did not answer. Instead, I spoke about my wish to be granted conscientious objector status by the Army, about my commitment to ending the war through nonviolent resistance and truth-telling. Not everyone there respected my decision. As I stood there, militant protesters in the crowd hurled accusations at me, calling me a coward, demanding more, wanting revelations. They wanted me to spill secrets, to become a whistleblower on the spot, but I knew the weight of what I carried. I knew that there was a line I would not cross, not because I lacked courage, but because my path was one of conscience rather than betrayal. I didn't want to betray my country, I said. I wanted to save it from betraying itself. Years later, when Edward Snowden stunned the world by leaking top-secret NSA documents in 2013, I couldn't help but reflect on the strange parallels between our stories. Snowden and I held similar top-secret intelligence clearances, which granted both of us access to the inner sanctums of American intelligence. Snowden worked with the National Security Agency, monitoring global communications, while I served in the ASA, the military's own counterpart. Yet, there was a crucial difference. In my era, neither the NSA nor ASA was yet engaged in the domestic surveillance that would later spark so much controversy. That shift, exposed so starkly by Snowden, had not yet come to 1968. I often wonder what might have happened if I had chosen a different path, if I had decided to reveal everything I knew. I held, in those years, the equivalent knowledge of what Snowden would later expose. I could have been the Edward Snowden of 1966-68. But I chose another way. Rather than betray secrets that might endanger lives or operations, I chose instead to take a public, principled stand. I sought to become a conscientious objector, a resistor to the war from within the ranks, using my voice and my story, not stolen documents, to fight for peace. This book is the story of that choice, and of those years of turbulence and transformation. It's a story of moral struggle, of the burdens and responsibilities of secrecy, and of the lonely path of the anti-war resistor. It is, above all, an attempt to shed light on a chapter of history that remains, even now, in the shadows, waiting to be understood. Epilog. To bury this history would be to erase the stories of those who, in the crucible of Vietnam, dared to resist not only the enemy abroad, but the silence and complicity at home. It would mean forgetting the lesson that even the mightiest empire can falter, not just from external foes, but from the quiet, determined people expressing their opposition. Many people believe, perhaps with good reason, that the U.S. government would prefer to see the history of the Vietnam War quietly buried beneath the weight of newer headlines and shifting public memory, a chapter left to gather dust, unexamined and unresolved. There is a persistent sense that the war is a shadow America tries to outrun, a story whose truths remain uncomfortable and whose lessons remain largely unlearned. But the legacy of the Vietnam War refuses to fade. It stands as a stark and undeniable testament to a moment when the world's most powerful superpower found itself brought to its knees, not by another mighty nation, but by a tenacious, barefoot army of peasants and farmers fueled by a fierce determination and a willingness to endure unimaginable hardship. Yet, the defeat was not simply a matter of military strategy or guerrilla tactics. It was also shaped from within. The collective resistance of men and women in the U.S. Armed Forces changed the course of the war in ways rarely discussed in history books. There were those who refused to fight, who questioned the mission, who saw the cost in blood and conscience, and chose another path. Across bases and battlefields, soldiers protested the war openly, risking imprisonment or worse. Some mutinied, rejecting orders they saw as senseless or cruel. Others sabotaged equipment, quiet acts of defiance intended to disrupt the machinery of war. Duty assignments were shirked, not out of cowardice, but as a deliberate stand against what they believed was an unjust conflict. Some, in the most desperate and dangerous circumstances, went so far as to frag their superior officers, a chilling expression of how deeply the rot of dissent had taken hold. Still others became conscientious objectors, navigating the perilous road of principle over obedience, determined to live by their own moral compass, even if it meant standing alone. This resistance was not merely a footnote. It was a force that rippled through the entire U.S. military, challenging the official narrative and forcing the nation to confront uncomfortable questions about justice, duty, and the true cost of war. It was the voices of those within the machine who refused to be silent, who exposed the fault lines running through American society itself. Courage of its own people, those who, against all odds, refused to surrender their conscience.